We got another shoebox video here, shoebox steering wheel to be specific, and what we're going to try to do is make a smaller diameter shoebox steering wheel. These original steering wheels are 18 inches in diameter, and sometimes it's nice to have a little smaller wheel, especially if you add power steering to the vehicle. You don't really need the big wheel, and sometimes the big wheel gets in the way. So the plan would be, we bought this wheel on eBay or someplace. The plan would be to remove all of the covering off of this wheel, and underneath there is a 5/16 rod in a circle. And the plan would be to remove that from the existing steering wheel, get a new piece of 5/16 rod, and make a smaller circle. So we can put it through the rolls and try to make a nice circle, maybe 15.5, 16 inches. And then what we'd have to do is cut the sides, these two spokes down, and cut back on them, and in the end weld the smaller diameter rod and end up with a smaller diameter wheel. The issue is going to be what we are able to cover the rod with to actually make a steering wheel out of it. Obviously you can't just have a 5/16 rod, and we don't have any way to coat the rod with this hard rubber like they did originally, so it's going to be something we're going to have to investigate. I have to say, this is not an original idea. I saw a story on the interweb about a guy that did this to his steering wheel, and seemed to work out all right, and I think we're going to try it, see if we can do it, and see what we end up with. We spent a little time on our steering wheel project. We're going to take this shoebox steering wheel that's 18 inches in diameter and make it smaller. What we did is we took and cut all of the plastic crap off of the rim, and surprisingly, what's underneath that appears to be 5/16 tubing, just a circle. There's a little joint over here, and then it's welded to the center spokes here, and that's it. So that's pretty cool. So what we did is we had some tubing, since we never throw anything away in the backyard. We happen to have some tubing. I think it's metric, but I won't tell. Pretty close to 312, 5/16. And since we have a set of rollers, we put that through the rolls and we made a smaller circle. And we made about 15.5, somewhere around there. We figured out what the circumference would be and cut a piece of tubing, and then just made a big circle till it met each other. But there you can see how much smaller that's going to be, about the width of your finger all the way around. Good way to know you're on center if your finger fits all the way around. So really, at some point we'll cut the old ring off. We've cut the plastic back, and we'll weld this new rim to the two center spokes and come up with a steering wheel. The thing that we have to determine next now is what we're going to cover the steering wheel with. And if I can move the camera a little bit without jumping things around too much. This is what was on there. This hard plastic molded around the steering wheel, and we just took a depth wheel and cut a little groove in it and then split it. It came off of there, but just a hard rubber, hard plastic, something wrapped around there. So we don't have the ability to do that, but the guy I saw do this on the internet on his, just a bunch of pictures, used some of this PEX tubing, and this is 3/8 ID PEX tubing. I don't know what the OD is, probably around a 1/2 inch maybe. And you know, in theory, I mean, this stuff is pretty flexible. I know you can't see that I'm making a big hoop there, but there it is, pretty flexible. And what we would like to do is run that right around that wheel, and then you use the PC7 epoxy to blend everything in. We're going to have to think about that. I also thought about taking some rubber hose and putting it around there. Or I might look at getting some shrink tubing, and some of this shrink tubing shrinks 4:1. And if we could put shrink tubing around there and put enough layers on there, we might be able to build that up. So I'm going to have to experiment here a little bit and see what works and what doesn't work. I've got another circle that I made that's a little smaller than this, and we'll try some things on it. And then of course when we're done, we'll make a little pin that will keep that joint together and weld it, so that when we weld that to the spokes, everything is cool. Now, one thing I see here is that right here, these spokes kind of come across and then sweep up, so that the outer rim is more or less in the center of this. And when I cut that off, I'm going to lose that sweep. So we may end up welding this tubing. I just don't know how we're going to weld that tubing on there, whether we're going to weld the tubing and let it lay on top of those spokes, or just how we're going to do that. But that's something we're going to have to figure out, because if I cut that off and then that spoke is way down there, that's going to put the steering it's not going to be on center of the deal here. So we got a little bit more to play with, a little bit more to figure out. We've got our practice ring here, a little bit smaller than what we're going to use, but we put a little bit of PEX on there, and then we put a couple of layers of shrink tubing over the PEX. And this is a 5/8 piece of 5/8 shrink tube, and the shrink rate is 4:1, so it'll actually shrink down pretty small. And it's got an adhesive inside, and it's pretty thick. So with 2 layers, we ended up with with 2 layers we ended up with a pretty thick rib on there. Now it's still not really thick enough. You could use it. It's not really quite thick enough for me. I think the stock wheel I measured was 800 thou, and this is around 700, 725 thou, so it really wants to be a little thicker. And I can't put another layer on there because it's gotten fat enough that it's bigger than the ID of the 5/8. So what I need to continue that is some 3/4 shrink tubing, and I've seen some of that. It has a 3:1 shrink rate, so I'm going to get some of that in here and try that. On the other side, I put this piece of fuel hose, and I don't know, let's see what the box says. It's 7/16 fuel hose, and there you go, big crash. So the inside is 7/16, but the outside is about 700 thou. So at the end of the day, we've got a piece of PEX and 2 layers of shrink tubing versus 1 layer of rubber hose, and we end up about the same thickness. And then if I was able to put another layer or 2 of shrink tubing over this, that might get the job done. So I'm going to have to buy some of that 3/4, maybe even 1 inch shrink tubing that'll shrink down, and see what I end up with. The PEX, this is 3/8 ID PEX, and the tubing is right around 5/16. The PEX is going to be a little tricky to work around there. The rubber hose is going to be a little easier to work around the ring because it's that much bigger inside, but you also have sort of a little movement. Now when you get it all the way around there, I don't think it's going to move because it's going to be in a big curve. So I really don't know yet. I like this, is nice and tidy, but not sure that's going to be the way to go. And this may be an easier way to go, to put this rubber hose on there, thick wall fuel line rubber hose, and then the shrink tubing over top of that. So we'll have to get some other tubing in here and see what we get.